Hello again, YouTube. In my previous video, I talked about how my runes and my traits worked well for Minion Master builds, and today I'm going to be showing you all how my weapons work and how you can use them in combinations and how they work with my minions. So let's get started. So here in the first one, we have um, your Scepter and Warhorn, and you deal damage and then give them a stack of bleeding that does very nice damage when it's combined with the condition damage that I have with my runes on my equipment, and my amulet will further this damage. And these attacks have a really nice range, as you can see, of 900, and there are no cooldowns on these kinds of powers, so they can be used as many times as you want. And on the third hit you do more damage and you inflict poison instead of bleeding. Poison does a little bit less damage over time than bleeding, but the healing effectiveness of the player that has poison is cut down 33%, which helps to cancel out their big heals that some guardians may have and just other classes that are trying to pull off a heal. The next one we have here is Grasping Dead, which is an AoE, as you can see by the red target. This one inflicts a large stack of bleeding for 8 3/4 seconds and a decent cripple for 5.5 seconds. The cripple is really nice to prevent kiting, and the bleeding just helps to stack more bleeding. As I said in the other video, the more bleeding, the more damage overall, just by making the condition duration longer. This one also does damage and does extra damage over time with the bleeding, and the radius of 240 is a nice round number that you're going to see a lot with this build, and the range is 900, so you can reach a long way away with this one and still hit a decent amount of targets. The next one is Feast of Corruption, which is where the main bulk of the damage comes from with this build, straight from you directly. This one deals a nice 664 damage and has an increased 8% damage increase with each different condition on the opponent, and also gives you 2% extra life force, and also has that nice round range of 900. So with that 8%, this build has a capability of giving bleeding and cripple with poison, and there's blind, and there's also immobilize, and there's also daze. So when you have all of those conditions at once, the maximum extra amount of damage you can do is like 40 to 48%, around 50% even, on the added damage of this one attack. And with this, with your vampiric abilities to siphon, this build becomes really deadly, and I found the nice balance between damage and the siphoning heals and all of that good stuff. The Whale of Doom is one of the controlling powers that I have mentioned in the previous video. It's a nice cone with a decent range. It's more melee than anything else, but the daze is meant to cancel the opponent's MOAs, like on Mesmers, and you stop the opponent's heals and throwing the larger attacks, because if they throw it and it gets interrupted, their recharge rate has to recharge again, and it's very devastating and very controlling when you can hit a lot of targets, because there is no limit on the amount of targets you hit with Whale of Doom. So any target that's in front of you will be dazed for 2 seconds, which is a 2 seconds where you're not going to be taking any damage. They can still move, but you're not going to be taking damage, which helps you to recover a little bit if you're down on health. The Locust Swarm, you gain swiftness and locusts swarm around you, a massive 13 seconds to increase your speed 33%, which helps to counteract cripples if they're on you, and just helps your overall mobility, because a lot of classes can have problems with mobility, like the Guardian has terrible mobility unless it's using a staff or anything else that they might have to increase speed. And this one also does damage and cripples, for anything that's going to get too close to you is going to have a hard time keeping up, because the minus 50% speed on them plus 33% on yourself is going to really make you outrun every kind of enemy possible. And the swiftness continues to last longer than the actual locusts are going to be swarming around you, just by a little bit, because of your increased boon duration that comes with putting your points into might, or your smite, that's what it's called. And it also gives you 1% life force every time you hit. So anything nearby you is just going to end up helping you in the end, because you're going to be siphoning, because this does damage. You're going to get life force for your death shroud, which makes you more survivable. And you're just dealing damage, and it has a radius of 180, which isn't too bad. So that's going to be really helpful. I'm going to now move on to daggers. Daggers attack a lot faster than your scepter, which is part of the reason why I have it, because you can siphon much faster, and these daggers help to really increase your life force by 2 to 4%, as you can see on the later hits. The range isn't too great, but it's a melee dagger, it's not a range dagger. So you use this when you just can't get out of warriors' range, because warriors love those charge of the bowl and the other kinds of great sword powers to hit you and keep you down. So when you can't get away, swap with your daggers to keep your siphoning up and just dealing damage and increasing your life force to get into that death shroud form, because that's going to aid in your survivability. The number 2 power you have here is your self-siphon, and your only self-siphon. It deals damage. As you can see, it does a lot of damage, and it hits 9 times. Each hit does more damage and siphons more, because you're dealing damage and you're also healing. So yeah, it's a lot of healing, and it's great damage. And the range isn't too bad either, but they do need to be kind of close to you when you use this power. Your number 3 ability here is an immobilize that keeps them still, and this also does damage and has the same range as your siphon. So if you can immobilize them with this ability, and then use your Bone Fiend's immobilize over here, you get 5.5 seconds of immobilize. And if they can't move, that's going to help increase your damage output, because all of your minions are going to be staying in melee range and hitting them and getting all of their damage through, which thus increases your siphoning and just keeps you alive longer. So the whole immobilize thing and the controlling effects really helps your survivability more than anything. The next ability here is Deathly Swarm, which deals damage, which is therefore going to siphon for you, and it deals a 6.5 second blind, which means the next outgoing attack is going to miss. This one is really nice because it's going to siphon when you hit them, and no one can go 6.5 seconds without throwing an attack, so you're guaranteed to not take damage from one attack that they throw. So make sure that if you see them doing a large animation, to throw this attack so that they miss whatever it is they're going to throw at you, like a MOA or something, because if a Mesmer misses their MOA, it's going to take like 2 minutes, I think, is the recharge on that, for them to even get it back, and all you had to do is throw one blind at them at the right moment. This thing also has a nice range of 900, which really allows you to hit them from a little far away, and it also has a bounce of 3, which will hit more than one target around the person that you hit with this power. The next one is Enfeebling Blood, which inflicts weakness and bleeding. This one is massive amounts of bleeding because of all of the condition damage and condition duration that I've put into this build. As you can see, the bleeding does 2381 damage and lasts for 12.5 seconds, which is going to be increased by, I think it's 25%, due to all of my smite duration that it automatically gets, and all my runes on my equipment combined. And all of that damage, plus it already does an initial damage, as you can see, so it's going to siphon as well, and the weakness to increase their endurance regeneration and cut down some of those engineers' really large dodging abilities and mesmer dodgings. it's going to become less, and their whole build basically goes down the toilet. The radius is 240, as I mentioned before. The 240 is a nice round number that you're going to see a lot. The 240, which is the same as the Scepter skill that I showed you earlier with 240. And this one's blast radius is 240. So 240 is the number you need to know, and notice how large of an effect radius it has so that you know when to use it at the right time, because you don't want to miss any damage involving this. So now I'm going to go on and talk to you guys about the Death Shroud form here. Death Shroud is used in a lot of situations, even though this isn't the main focus of the build. It helps survivability with any Necromancer, and now I'm going to show you exactly what it does. So this one is the basic blast, just does basic damage and helps with your siphoning. This one you throw out a hand and it's going to pull you to a target, dealing bleeding damage, which is going to siphon, and chilling them to decrease their movement speed and skill recharge. It's got a really nice range. Doom is used for someone when they go for a stomp. They're going to be able to unsuccessfully pull it off due to fear. And this one is a massive AoE siphon that gives 3% life force gain and has a nice range on that. But you're going to want to be able to make sure that you use that siphon last, or to get out of that form quickly when you use it, because it's going to help you gain all of your life force back, and you're going to be able to use it again when you drop out, because your life force is going to be saved, and then when the form recharges after use, you can go right back into the form and you should have around full life force again. Yeah, so that concludes this video of how the weapons work and how they work well with the minions. Next video I'm going to show you how the minions work in a little bit of combat against some target golems that are below where I'm standing. So thanks for watching, have a great day, and see you in a bit.